Hi, I'm Christina, and this is New Ways Podcast. Today, our guest is a Lebanese dietitian and a holistic nutritionist, Sara Rawda. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Christina.
Yeah, I'm super excited. This episode is going to be kind of about your journey into becoming a dietitian. And honestly, you guys, I'm super excited to talk about when we were speaking on the phone about your experience with becoming a dietitian, we talked a lot about 90s diet culture, which rocked my world when I was in middle school and high school. So I'm super excited to dive deep into that. And then for our listeners, please tune in to episode 2 because we're really going to get to the nitty gritty of gut health in that episode. But for now, how about we start off then? What caused you to go down the path of becoming a dietitian and holistic nutritionist?
So I always was really interested in food. I grew up in a family who, in our culture, we love to eat, we love to cook. And my dad and his brothers actually had a family restaurant. And we kind of grew up in that. And I was always interested in food. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And so, as time went by, I realized I kind of want to learn more about the nutrition of food. And, like you said, 90s diet culture, we were all kind of doing these crash low-fat diets.
Oh, girl.
And it was terrible. And, we were doing that for so long. And me personally, I just didn't see, a change in my body. And I knew that there was something wrong. I was doing something wrong. So that's why I wanted to study nutrition, basically.
Okay, so let's dive into this then. At a young age, you said diet culture and stuff played a huge part, as well as obviously I'm sure that the nutrition information you were getting at home from your family and your culture was probably a lot different than what social media and the magazines were portraying for us to do. So can you kind of tell us about your journey with that? How did you start perceiving yourself when it came to diet culture in the 90s and at a young girl?
Yeah, so growing up in a Middle Eastern family, that is a big focus. I don't know if anyone else can relate, but the weight is a big focus. The way you look, it's always something that had been commented on. It's always oh, you lost weight. Oh, you gained weight. These are the first comments. So automatically, weight became something that I was just always, cautious about. And it started out, it really was unhealthy. I developed an eating disorder and I just had this really unhealthy relationship with food. I was journaling and writing down every single calorie I was eating throughout the day. I had this journal where if I went over 1,000 calories a day, it was a disaster. And it was terrible. And I was on these really low fat, low calorie diets. I was eating lots of fruits because they were so low calorie and not knowing, fruits still have sugar and you need protein, you need the healthy fats, especially as a woman. So all these things I didn't know. I just thought I was, going to lose weight because I wasn't eating very much. And, that developed into an eating disorder. And I realized, after 4 years of that, there's something wrong. Nothing is changing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what moved me towards wanting to learn about nutrition specifically. But I'm sure a lot of women can relate that, it is tough growing up in families where diet and the way you look is such an important factor. So yeah, unfortunately, we had to go through that. It's not like how it is now where, it's not the norm, that type of diet culture, which is great. But it brought me to where I am now. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to so many things that you just said. I really am curious about the whole culture aspect because my weight was not focused on so much when I was a child, but it was the one thing that I did kind of have control over. And I grew up watching America's Next Top Model, and you would go to the grocery store with your family. And obviously there's People magazine calling Britney Spears fat on the magazine. And right now she's actually then she was a skinny actually body weight compared to what we were perceive as normal now. Mm-hmm. So obviously as a young girl, you're I want to look like my idols. And it brought a lot of us down a really nasty rabbit hole because I can relate where I was counting calories. I would eat literally the same meal every single day because I knew what was in it. I would make a peanut butter and jelly and have barely any peanut butter on it. It got to the point when I was in middle school, I was like actually passing out because I was not eating enough. And at
Yeah.
a young age, you're burning so many calories too. You need that
Yeah.
nutrition.
Yeah.
So my hair would start falling out. Like I was passing out, and my family was like didn't even know, because it's so easy to keep it like secretive, or you just think this is normal anyways, because that's what we perceived as normal.
Yeah. And I remember, kind of similarly, I was happy going to school when I was a teenager because it meant that I could go the whole day without eating. Like no one would notice. So I
Yeah.
can just like not have any calories at all and then go home and then have, dinner. And so just thinking about that I was so excited to go the whole day without eating, without anyone telling me like, anything. It's crazy. And like I hear it, I still hear it though with the clients that I work with, that, that's something that comes up for them. And it's just, it's still around. Maybe it's more talked about now. It's easier to share about an eating disorder or, your weight, or if you don't feel good in your body. But at the time, you couldn't share that. I don't remember being able to share that with anyone. It was just kind of something I kept to myself.
Why do you think that is when it comes to family, or specifically your culture, that we fixate so much on like body size and beauty, and like, because everything's subjective, is it not?
Yeah. You would think so, but I don't know. Like I grew up and that was a reoccurring comment every time I would go to family gatherings, is like, you gained weight or you lost weight. Like that would be the first thing, family members would say. I never really understood it. Of course, if you want to think about it now, it might be from like their own insecurities or, how their parents treated them. So it's like, that generational trauma. I don't know. I think our society is very focused on image. And
Oh, for sure.
that is a big reason why.
Yeah. Thankfully, like I said, I didn't grow up too much with that. Oddly enough, though, my dad to this day does kind of pick, sorry, Deanna, I'm calling you out right now. My little sister, love her to death. She's put on a little bit of weight over the years. She's still a healthy body weight or whatnot, but my dad is 77 and definitely loves like the skinny girls. So he started calling me at one point too jiggles. And I'm like, Dad, this is not okay.
Yeah, you can't say that. It's actually hurtful,
It
even as a joke.
is.
Yeah, I know those comments would come up a lot. They don't realize it. They don't have the like, awareness that we do now, and they haven't worked on themselves, as much as we have now to realize like, there's certain things you can say and some that you can't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you just kind of have to leave it at that. Sometimes it's like, okay, like they made a comment, whatever, like brush it off.
Brushing it off is definitely easier said than done. And it also makes me wonder too, and this is why I just encourage people so much to like focus on their mental health and their image of themselves and love themselves, because like the more I started to realize that like, hey, all these kind of like ideations of what we should be doing and who we should look like are made up. And like, I love myself for being me. And I think that I'm like an amazing weight and I'm beautiful. It doesn't matter what everybody else says. Those comments don't sting as much. But I feel like oftentimes too, because once again, growing up in the 90s, you need to be bone skinny to be perceived as beautiful. That's why it probably hurts, is because all of our life we've been like trying to achieve that type of like standard. And then when somebody goes against it, we're like, damn, dude, like that just crushed my soul. We're like, if you never focused on your weight, if somebody calls you that, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's fine. So yeah, such interesting and traumatic stuff in a way. But before we get into kind of, I'm curious about your schooling, but one other thing that I really want to actually touch base on, since we're kind of on the subject, is low fat products, because those are things that did blow up in the 90s also. You see low fat milks, low fat yogurts, low fat salad dressings, all that stuff. And a lot of times, correct me if I'm wrong, that means that they replace a lot of the stuffs in there with even more processed additive foods. What is your outlook on stuff like that is labeled like low fat food?
It depends, for everyone. If someone is overweight and they need to lose weight, that is the only way, is like your calories in, calories out. So for these people, low fat diets, reducing the amount of calories, increasing the exercise is something that is going to help them. However, for women, especially if we're at a normal weight, we do need healthy fats for our hormones. So our hormones are fueled through fat. So going on a low fat diet can be, counterintuitive to us wanting to lose weight. And then, but also other like conditions, like people who have pancreatic insufficiency, they need to be on a lower fat diet. So it really depends on everyone's condition. If you are just generally healthy and you're like a young woman, you do need, a healthy amount of fats and healthy fats, omega-3s, to fuel your hormones. And so, and like you said, some of the low fat products, a lot of other things are added in there, kind of like how a lot of the gluten-free and vegan products are also, fueled with other additives in there to kind of mask the taste. Not all of them, but, some are. So it depends on everyone.
Yeah. Just like, so would you say, particularly if somebody needed a low fat diet, they should probably focus more on foods that are just naturally low in fat versus the processed stuff or the stuff that has the fat taken out in a way?
Yeah, exactly. So like fruits, vegetables, they're naturally low in fat, even some yogurts that still some of like the low fat Greek yogurts, there's nothing really added in there. So those are, still healthy to have. But the ones that have artificial sweeteners, for example, added to remove some of the calories, then that's kind of something you want to be mindful of. It's not harmful in moderation, but when it becomes an excess and it's something that you're having every single day, that can be something that can, in the end disrupt your gut.
Yeah.
And, you don't know what else it could cause. So it's just eating natural foods and foods that are grown in nature. I always say like things that probably 100 years ago were very accessible. That's probably one of, the best diets that you could go on.
Yeah, I love that. And another thing I want to kind of bring up then that you brought it up was these vegan foods, because I do love how we're going a little bit further away from like eating a lot of animals. I am not against it. I'm still a meat eater. For some reason, I've focused more on like, I love tofu now. I never used to, but the way you can dress it up is just so great.
Yeah.
One thing that I read was Beyond Meat in a way, right? Is it true that it's actually like not healthy for you at all?
Depends on the brand.
Yeah.
I've seen some Beyond Meat burgers, not that brand, specifically the Beyond Meat one, but other brands that have made really clean, just veggie burgers. Basically, that's what it is. They're made with beans and broccoli and cauliflower, and there's not too many additives there. So I like to see that. But then that brand, specifically the Beyond Meat, I think there's like a lot of additives in there. I had a client ask me, for alternatives the other day, and that's how I found the other ones. But always look at the ingredients. The longer the ingredient list, the more you want to stay away from it. If you see any numbers in the ingredient list, also stay away from that. Anything ending in like OL, like erythritol, sorbitol, maltitol, those are all artificial sweeteners and they can disrupt your gut health. So you just be mindful of the ingredient list. You always want to look for something shorter.
Definitely. I didn't mean to call out that brand either, but I was just like, that's the thing is, once again, like media, honestly, just like with all these new fads coming out, we're so programmed to just trust automatically what we see, especially if something's labeled as healthy. Or it's like the message is actually really good, right? But then you have to kind of dig deeper and be like, oh, I can't trust this brand, or maybe it's not as good for me. So that's why I feel like so many of us might struggle with like being able to read labels and figuring out what is actually good for us in this world. So
yeah, and it's also very time consuming, and especially with women or people in general who have eating disorders, it's not really healthy to just sit and read the labels all the time. So I always like to say, eat whatever feels good to you and listen to your body. And if you are having, some sort of reaction or something doesn't feel right, then listen to that. You know your body best. Like, when something is wrong. And if you're having too much of these processed foods, then you want to balance it. It can't be perfect. You're never going to have a perfect diet, but it's all about, just balancing everything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Honestly, though, that is why I don't go to the grocery store anymore. It's because I will get sucked in to reading every single label of something that I think I might want to try.
That's what I do. So it's just like, it's not, I do it because I'm like, okay, it's for like research purposes. Like I can help my clients with that. So it gives me an excuse. But before I became a nutritionist, then I just did it because I felt so anxious. Like it was out of anxiety. I don't know. It was really weird. I was so obsessed with it.
Yeah, I think mine's probably a mix of anxiety as well as just like, I care about my body. I want it to be especially working in like hospitals for so long throughout my life. I've seen so many people come in with different cancers, different types of like issues, and your body's a temple. I want to put everything good in my body. And if I can avoid something that's not good, that's why I look at labels. But you're right, it might cause some anxiety also, and we might stress about it too much, causing other issues. But yeah, people ask me, they're like, why do you just always get your groceries delivered? I have not stepped foot into a grocery store unless it is to do Whole Foods returns for Amazons in probably 2 years. I'm like, that has everything that I need. I click on it, it gets delivered. I don't have to like go down this horrible like 5 hours in a grocery store reading
Yeah.
labels.
Yeah.
That's what I will do.
And sometimes that's what you have to do, like yourself best. If you
Yeah.
want to avoid the grocery store, then just do that.
Yeah. I love this. So then kind of moving on a little bit, tell me about your studies becoming a dietitian. What surprised you? What are things that you learned that you didn't know before? Kind of bring me down that path.
Yeah, so I studied to become a dietitian in Lebanon. And
Okay.
then I went to Canada after that program, and I did a holistic nutrition program in Canada. So in Lebanon, I did the dietitian program, and it was tough. Like, that's something I didn't realize at the time. I knew I was really passionate about it. So I was very passionate about the nutrition courses, but you have a bunch of prerequisites like biology and chemistry and like human physiology that you have to learn. And we took all of that with the pre-med students. And so I struggled a lot. Like the first year and a half, I really struggled to keep my grades up because I was studying things that I wasn't necessarily super passionate about that. But once I pushed through, obviously, and then we moved on to like more of the nutrition courses. And that's when I started to do a lot better and I enjoyed what I was learning. But it was definitely a learning curve. And it's not an easy program. It's not as easy as you might think it is. It's very science based. If you guys are thinking of getting into it,
You'll be with pre-med students.
yes, you
Keep
will.
that in mind.
It's gonna be
but
tough.
it's worth it if you want to do it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And then the holistic nutrition program was just a year. It was in Canada to get certified. But I wanted to move into that because I was always interested. I like that I have like the sciencey background with, nutrition, and I know about the human body. It's super important to have like that background in medical nutrition therapies. But then I always wanted to kind of learn more about, more holistic treatments, more natural ways of healing that is not necessarily, just strict dieting. Maybe there's something more like herbs and supplements and like the mental health aspect of it. A lot of that I learned in the holistic nutrition program. And so, I did that one for a year and I combine both. I work in clinical practice too, and I have my own practice. And so I work with a lot of gastroenterologists, and, there's a big, you have to really combine the Western and Eastern medicine here. And so we do a really good job of like doing that. But I always like to, if the clients are comfortable with that, then suggest, supplements and more herbal treatments. And a lot of them are more inclined nowadays to go on more natural route. But yeah, in my own practice, I focus mostly on like natural ways of healing and women's health as well. And, wherever you can supplement, but then getting most of your nutrients just from food.
Okay. So you had to kind of take a different program in a way to focus more
Yeah.
on the holistic aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I learned, I learned most of my stuff from my dietitian degree,
Yeah.
but there's a lot about like vitamins that I didn't learn in that program that I learned later on in the holistic program. A lot about like herbs that are super healing for your body that I learned in the holistic nutrition program, about, different cultures and how it is so beneficial to eat based on your cultural like food, because that's what, your ancestors are used to eating. And, that's how your digestive system is more inclined to feel better when eating these types of foods. So it's just, these things that I kind of learned, and the mental health aspect of it too, is like, there's a big connection between the gut and the brain. And that's something that we focused a lot on in the holistic nutrition program.
Okay. What made you gravitate more towards holistic versus like traditional necessarily?
I kind of, when I was living in Lebanon after I graduated, I was organizing with my university. We organized a conference around, natural remedies, like how Western and Eastern medicine meets. And we got speakers from all over the world to speak about, not just, holistic ways of healing, but also, like how medication can also help with that, so it was a big combination of both. And that's what really introduced me to, holistic nutrition and holistic
Mm-hmm.
health. It was more of like an integrative medicine conference that we were organizing. And so I started to learn about it from that conference. And then when I moved to Canada after that, I wanted to do a nutrition program to get certified to be able to work there. I didn't want to go back and do the whole, like, you have to go if you study abroad. When you move to a different country, you kind of have to go and like redo like a lot of the
Yeah.
program and to get registered as a dietitian. I just didn't want to do more of that schooling. And so I found this holistic nutrition program. It was just for a year, and I'm like, okay, like this is something that can be super useful. And I got into it, and I'm like, okay, I actually, I relate to it, a lot of what they're saying. Like what I like to eat is a lot of what, they're preaching here too. And
Mm-hmm.
I always found that, diet is not just about like the calories that you're eating. There has to be more to it. So that's what kind of drew me to that.
Okay, I love that. And I just want to applaud you also for finding like a way around the system. I know it might be intimidating for a lot of people coming from a different country
Mm-hmm.
to be like, oh, I have to start all over again. But in my mind too, I'm like, college is definitely a beneficial tool. But when it's actually in alignment with what you want to do, I'm like, just because there's one path and it says you should be doing it this way in order to like accomplish what you want to accomplish or like give the world what you have to offer, like you kind of thought creatively and you're like, I don't actually have to do this again. I already hold all the knowledge and I can still help. Let me go on a path that's more my own.
Yeah.
So I love that. I think that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I took that path.
Yeah. And also too, I know you kind of mentioned previously that there are some amazing like herbs and supplements. For our viewers, once again, the next episode, we're going to focus a lot on gut health because that's such a trending topic these days. But are there any like herbs and supplements that you love that you think can really benefit, like people can benefit in their health?
So first, definitely check what you're deficient in. So you will always need, like what you're deficient in, but magnesium is really great. You can never really get too much of it. So that's something I take every single night, magnesium glycinate, and it just helps your body relax. It helps you sleep. What I also like to do is like take magnesium gel because it's absorbed a lot better in your body. If you have trouble sleeping, this really does help, and just like rub it on the soles of your feet, and then it really helps absorb it and it helps really relax your
Oh,
body. So yeah, for those who, the pills are not working, then the gel can be something to have. That would be like my top recommendation, is just having more magnesium. And then there's a lot of, different supplements. Like right now, a lot of people are talking about NAD, which is, it helps with your DNA and cellular
yeah.
regeneration, and liposomal glutathione, same thing, helps with cellular regeneration. So these are things that, kind of keep you young. So, they're not harmful to take, and it can be something that is more of like a preventative. So that's another thing that I like to take daily. For anxiety, maybe reishi mushroom is pretty good. It works quicker than ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is not bad either. It does interact with some medication, so always, be mindful of that. So these are a few things that, I would take more, regularly. In terms of herbs and teas, like, you know, chamomile tea, like your pure, like just chamomile tea. Echinacea is really good for your immune system. So if you're feeling kind of sick, so that's a good one to take. And then ginger and turmeric are things that I love to recommend, especially if you have inflammation or if you have gut health issues. Ginger and turmeric tea is, something to start.
Yeah. I just thank you so much for like offering those and sharing that, because those are all things that I implement in my daily life too. And you kind of just nailed the big ones I feel like a lot of people suffer with: sleep, anxiety, and cellular regeneration in a way, and trying to stay young.
Yeah.
NAD was something recently that like I've got put onto. I used to give it to people IV, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And I just didn't even know something like that existed, to be honest with you. So it's so cool.
What is your experience with like giving it through IV to people?
So NAD and IV with people, that's where I was like, what is this? Because when I used to work as like an IV nurse, concierge nurse, I'd go to people's homes and give them IVs. I've done a lot of things in my life. We would actually have to sit with them for over an hour because it would give them like a rush.
Okay.
Yeah, like they
Mm.
describe it to me as kind of like drinking 4 energy drinks at
Oh my
once.
God.
Yeah. I mean, oddly, like obviously the whole point of NAD is kind of like what you said, and then also like cellular regeneration. Like it's really good for that aspect as well as like cognitive thinking. It's supposed to be good for.
Hmm.
That's why I take the pills, is because I've noticed an impact in like my concentration in a way and creative thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, people's heart rate would increase when we give it to them IV. They would get a burst of energy. It would last them for more than half the
Oh
day.
my God.
So like IV and even IM, which is
Hmm.
intramuscular, like we would see some insane results. Besides all that though, which once again, thank you so much for that. w- You mentioned know your like markers, know your levels.
Hmm.
Are there any tests that you can recommend for people to pay attention to or try to get? Because we go in for our yearly checkups, right? I feel like they
Hmm.
draw our blood, they check very, very basic stuff, if anything, like functionality and like your organs. And then they're like, okay, you're fine, go on your way. Or they
Yeah.
tell you things when you're already sick. They don't
Yeah.
pay attention to trends a lot
Yeah.
of times. And that's the doctor's job, is to realize when something's wrong, not trend when something is happening to you. What can you recommend for people to like test, pay attention to, and notice in their labs?
You really like the first thing I always say is, you want to notice your inflammation levels. So that's your CRP levels. So they can, test for that.
Hmm.
For men and women, mostly women, you want to test your hormones. So do a hormone panel, your, thyroid stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, like all of those. Just test for that. Just make sure that, everything is in check. And then those would be the two big ones I would focus on, and your blood sugar. So, just to make sure like that's like the lipid profile as well. That goes without saying, you check like your lipid profile, your blood sugar levels, and your iron. That's super important. But then two things that they don't usually test for is the CRP and your hormone levels.
Hmm. Is that something that you recommend people in like their visits to mention to their doctor? Or do you, because I know now there's a lot of independent blood testing
Yeah.
companies. Do you have any that you recommend?
I don't know any here in the
Uh-huh.
US, but you can, I mean, there's a lot of private clinics that can test. I think any doctor can test for your CRP
Yeah.
levels, especially if you have a gut health issue. Just test for inflammation. And then hormone panel too. My GP, like I'll ask her if I can test for my cortisol levels, and she'll be like, "Yeah, sure." So you can test for those through your GP. Um, I think it should all be through like the family doctor, but then additional stuff where it's more like, let's say your DNA, I've seen private clinics do like testing for that, and like your telomeres, which is part of your DNA. So it's to see if those are still, healthy, and if you want to really really get into like the nitty-gritty, then that would be like in a completely different like private practice. They would
Hmm.
do that. But I think the GP can do anything from like those that I mentioned.
Okay. And then kind of also to wrap up, if you don't mind me asking, what is probably the most beneficial thing that you have learned for somebody's health throughout your like dietitian nutritionist journey? What is something, if you can recommend to anybody, that they should pay very close attention to and that's important, something that surprised you?
When it comes to their health,
Honestly, anything. What is
okay.
just something where if you could tell anybody something about their health, what would it be? Or something that you're like, this changed my life?
Yeah. Really listen to your body. You really know, like your body very well. I can't tell you, like there's been a few times I've been to the doctor with like symptoms, and they diagnosed me right away with PCOS, and I'm like, I know I don't have PCOS. Like like there's sometimes you just feel it. And then at the end I didn't. It was just like, something that I was going through. I didn't get my period for a long time, and I'm like, I think I'm just over exercising, and you know, and then my doctor diagnosed me with PCOS, and then a year later I refused to take any of the like medication she had told me to, and then a year later she's like, "Yeah, I think it was your diet." I'm like, "Yeah, I
Yeah,
know."
thank you for
Yeah,
that.
thanks. I told you. So it's yeah, just listen to your body. If you feel anything is off, definitely, go get checked, but also you kind of know what's going on, and always get like different opinions. Don't just listen to one person. That's a big thing. And another thing is like the way you perceive things and the mental health aspect of it is super important. So, you know, you might not realize it, but the way you think about your body and the way you think about like any condition that you have, if you make it your whole life and you make it like, oh my God, like I just have IBS or IBD and like I'm so helpless or whatever, you will feel helpless and it will never get better. So just try and think like there's a way around it and you can get better. Just keeping that mindset, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story with us, because that's something that I'm really big on. I do believe in like mind body connection. And don't get me wrong, love my doctors. I have some really good friends. I've got some amazing ones in my life.
Yeah.
But like you said, listen to your body, because if you actually did accept that diagnosis, you would be taking medicine that you probably don't need, as well as like who knows the rabbit hole that it would have brought you down on trying to fix something that wasn't wrong with you in the first place. So I really love how you're like, please just listen to yourself and take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows your body like you know your body. So thank you for sharing that story. But no, thank you so much for this informative and amazing conversation. I cannot wait to dive deep into the next episode. We're going to focus on gut health, you guys.
Very
so
exciting.
Please, later this week, tune in. And once again, just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Christina, for having me.
Of course. And then until next time, guys, I love you. Thank you.